going on, guys? So today we're continuing off with our Star Wars reviews with Return of the Jedi. So like I said in my previous videos, I'm going to give a brief summary, talk about the things that I found pretty interesting, the things that I quite didn't like, especially in this case because Return of the Jedi is my personal favorite of the original trilogy. So let's get started, shall we? So this film takes about a couple of months after the end of the last film. Luke and the rebels are plotting to rescue Han Solo from the clutches of Jabba the Hutt. Meanwhile, with the Empire, they're close to completing the second Death Star, to which both Vader and the Emperor are personally overseeing. Which kind of doesn't really make sense to me, considering that this Death Star is a little bit bigger than the original, and that one took about 20 or so years to get that one done, so I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, Vader's head is still more towards finding his son more than anything, and the Emperor reassures him that they will find Luke and they're going to turn him to the dark side eventually. So like I said, Luke and the rebels have come up with this plan to rescue Han from the clutches of Jabba, but it's a bit of a process, that way Jabba won't suspect a thing. First, C-3PO and R2 are sent to Jabba's palace with a message from Luke, telling Jabba to release Han in exchange for the droids, to which 3PO actually believes this. But it's actually part of the plan, obviously. Jabba does agree on keeping the droids, but he's not gonna hand off Han that easily, considering that he owed him a ton of money, and he feels he has Han where he wants him to be. So that didn't work, which leads on to the next phase of the plan. Later that evening, a bounty hunter arrives with Chewbacca as a prisoner and begins to bargain with Jabba in exchange for money. But this is still all part of the plan, since this bounty hunter is actually Leia in disguise, and she's here to save Han and unfreeze him from the carbonite. But just as Leia's about to escape with Han, she's caught by Jabba himself and his people, or creatures. So Han gets imprisoned yet again, but this time he's not frozen, he's kept with Chewie, and Leia becomes his new slave girl, considering that he killed the last one, he needs a new one, and he makes her wear this shiny, seductive metal bikini. Anyways, this leads on to the third phase of Luke's plan, which is him actually coming to the palace himself. And I find Luke's introduction onto the movie to be very interesting because we get to see a brand new Luke. Unlike in the previous films where he was still stumbling with his Force abilities and being very vulnerable with things, here he just comes like a total badass, fully confident, Force choking Jabba's minions and doing Jedi mind tricks. You can see he's improved in just a short amount of time. So, wow, I mean, I guess prodigies really do run the family, huh? So Luke gives Jabba an ultimatum yet again, telling him to release him and his friends or to be killed, but instead Jabba decides that he's going to trap Luke in the Rancor pit instead. But Luke manages to fight off the beasts, ends up killing him, so at this point Jabba's already fed up with Luke and the prisoners, and he decides that he's going to have all of them terminated and get eaten by the Sarlacc in the Dune Sea. Funny thing is though that Luke's still pretty confident about his plan. He's not freaking out or being afraid or anything, he's just pretty chill. So one thing I forgot to mention though is that Lando Calrissian is also in disguise here as one of Jabba's henchmen, and it makes sense since he left at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, so we can kind of imply to see more so what he had in mind or what he ended up doing, so good for Lando. So Jabba and his entourage head off onto the Dune Sea on a ship to have the prisoners killed. So just as Luke is walking into the plank and getting ready to be eaten by the Sarlacc, he signals R2 to shoot off his lightsaber into the sky, in which starts the counterattack. And thus the counterattack begins, which leads on to the death of Jabba the Hutt, Boba Fett getting eaten by the Sarlacc, and the entire ship just blowing up. So while the gang heads off to the rebel fleet, Luke decides he's going to take his own route, that being to Dagobah, since he feels that it's time to complete his training with Yoda. But Yoda has grown weak, sick, and he's ready to become one with the Force. He tells Luke that no more training is needed and the only thing left to do is to face Vader once more. Not only that, but he also confirms to Luke that Darth Vader is in fact his father, and he peacefully passes away with his final words mentioning that there is another Skywalker out there. Following Yoda's passing, Luke begins to talk to the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's just telling him about the story of Anakin and how he was a great and cunning warrior, but the good man that was his father was destroyed. But Luke disagrees, and he feels that his father is still in there somewhere and he wants to bring him back to the light side. So back with the rebels, they manage to come up with a plan on how to destroy the Death Star. That being, sending Han and a group of rebels onto the planet of Endor to destroy the defense shields of the Death Star. Meanwhile, Lando is leading the entire fleet to destroy the battle station once they turn off the defense shields. The only way to destroy the Death Star is by destroying the reactor itself within the battle station. It all seems fine and dandy until Darth Vader begins to sense that his son is nearby. So when they get to Endor, Luke and Leia end up splitting up after chasing a couple of stormtroopers on the speeder bikes, which is a fantastic scene by the way. Leia meets the Ewoks, and at first they're a little bit defensive with the rebels, but ultimately they join forces after believing that C-3PO is some sort of god. So while spending the night with the Ewoks before the big battle against the Empire, Luke decides that he's going to turn himself into the Empire because he knows that he's jeopardizing the entire plan by just being there. But not before telling Leia the truth. The truth being that they're brother and sister. And her reaction to this huge revelation really surprises me because, well, have a look yourself.
I know. Somehow, I've always known.
Well, I guess you don't know everything about women yet.
Somehow, I've always known. I've always known. I've always known.
Oh. You've always known, huh? Well. What the hell, movie? Did the writers forget about the 2 kissing scenes from the last film? I mean, what? What do you mean you've always known? Like, God. Anyways, Luke turns himself into the Empire and he tries to persuade Darth Vader to join, the good side, but it doesn't really work. He ends up taking him to the Emperor nonetheless, but you begin to notice that Darth Vader is in fact having conflict within him. So while the battle is going on both on Endor and in space, Luke is fighting the Emperor who's trying to make him join the dark side. And you can tell that Luke is tempted to just strike down the Emperor, but he knows that those are just the first steps into joining the dark side, so he doesn't. Instead, it leads on to Vader and Luke clashing onto their second duel. Unlike in their first battle though, where Luke was pretty much vulnerable and Vader was just toying with him, here Luke seems to be taking the upper hand because he's a very skilled Jedi at this point. But Vader knows how to get to Luke's weakness, and he begins to tell him that if he doesn't join to the dark side, Leia will. This rage lets out Luke's dark side, and he begins to just strike his lightsaber onto Darth Vader's and repeatedly until he finally chops off Darth Vader's hand. Talk about karma, am I right? The Emperor sees this as a perfect opportunity to make Luke join the dark side and replace Darth Vader in his side. But once again, Luke denies the Emperor and he proudly stands as a Jedi Knight like the one his father used to be. So while that's going on, back on Endor, they manage to destroy the defense shields. So now pretty much they just have to blow it up. Back with the Emperor, he decides that if he's not gonna turn, he's gonna destroy him instead. Instead, he begins to shoot Force lightning to Luke, slowly increasing the intensity to make him suffer. Luke is just pleading to his father to help him, and Darth Vader's conflict comes to a breaking point, and he finally redeems himself back into Anakin Skywalker. Anakin saves his son by grabbing the Emperor and throwing him down the reactor shaft. Unfortunately, the Force lightning mortally wounds Anakin in the process. So with the Empire in panic, Luke is trying to escape the Death Star with his wounded father, but he urges him to leave him there and to just take off his mask so he can take a look at his son with his own eyes for the first and the last time. So after finally accepting that Luke was right this entire time, he passes away, being the last of the old Jedi Order to die. Meanwhile, Lando piloting the Millennium Falcon manages to find the reactor and destroy it, thus destroying the entire Death Star, with Luke just escaping seconds to spare. Back on Endor, Luke gives a proper funeral to his father, just how the old Jedi used to do with their fallen brethren, while the rest of the galaxy is just celebrating on this huge victory. After this, Luke reunites with his friends and the Ewoks, and they begin to celebrate. The film ends with Luke seeing the spirits of Yoda, Obi-Wan, and his redeemed father Anakin Skywalker proudly watching over him. So like I said, Return of the Jedi is my favorite in the original trilogy. I don't know, I guess I'm just a sucker for conclusions, Like with the Harry Potter films, my personal favorite's The Deathly Hallows, Part 2. Not only because of that, but it's because this film also brings that triumphant feeling that was missing in The Empire Strikes Back. This is their comeback. Loose ends between characters are tied, but we all know that there was still more battles to come following this, like the Battle of Jakku and the rise of the First Order 30 years later. Now, don't get me wrong, despite it being my favorite film, I do acknowledge that it does have its flaws. I mean, for one thing, the whole thing with Luke and Leia really bothers me. I mean, did the writers not think of the last film, how she kissed him not only once but twice? So they can just add that whole "I've always known" line to it? I don't know, I get triggered by it. Also, while I did praise some of the changes done to The Empire Strikes Back, I can't really say that about this film. For one, the addition of adding that disgusting CGI monster at Jabba's palace singing. No. Another big change that they made to the film that really bothers me is that they replaced Sebastian Shaw at the end of the film with Hayden Christensen's head. I mean, I do get they wanted to keep continuity with the prequels, but I don't know, it just looks really off to me, and to a lot of people. Even Hayden himself didn't even know that he was added onto this film, because that shot you see of Hayden Christensen is a test shot for Revenge of the Sith. I think it was nice that they brought back the same actors that played the slave girl at Jabba's palace for a brand new scene to be added. It's crazy that this new shot was done years later after Return of the Jedi, and she looks almost the same. I mean, she's in great shape. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like the new celebration song they added at the end of the film, along with the new shots of various planets celebrating the Empire's defeat. But I feel like it was totally unnecessary to remove Yub Nub. I mean, that's basically a classic. They should have just kept Yub Nub and just added the new scenes of all the other planets, in my opinion. And that wraps up my take on Return of the Jedi and the original trilogy. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it's taken me a little bit to just cram out these videos, mainly because of finals and shit, you know. Ugh. But I'm still gonna try and get all these done before The Last Jedi. And if not, you know, it is what it is. It's still Star Wars season nonetheless, and these videos will come out eventually. But that's only if I really can't finish them by the time the movie comes out. But yeah, next time we're moving on to the prequel trilogy, which I know a lot of you aren't so fond of those films. But it's Star Wars, and we're gonna talk about it because I love all things Star Wars, even if it's flawed. So yeah, hope you enjoyed my review. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. The channel is slowly but surely growing, and I thank you for that. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next one.